Hello and welcome to the panel at Dublin BIC. Today is Tuesday, the 12th of May 2020, and I'm delighted to be joined by Michael Culligan, the CEO of Dublin BIC. Michael, you're very welcome.
Thank you, Martin. Good afternoon.
Michael, will you introduce us, please, to Dublin BIC?
I'd be delighted to do so. Dublin BIC is a public-private entity. It's been around actually since 1988. When Dublin was celebrating its millennium, 1,000 years of age. It was set up initially at a time of recession in Ireland, and the idea really was to help create new startups that would bring new employment. Its role in life is very, very simple. It's to empower entrepreneurs to start new businesses. And they should be born in global businesses, trading out of Ireland. We do that through a number of ways by providing business advice, access to finance, incubation facilities, and also encouraging collaboration between the various startup companies. We work very closely in partnership with both public and private entities, public such as Enterprise Ireland and the Department of Business, Enterprise and Innovation, and in many private companies in support of these entrepreneurs. And the range of activities goes all the way from investor-ready business planning through to access to finance. That includes seed funds, includes business angel networks, and then running events such as Future Scope, which is now the #1 innovation event in Ireland. And of course, in the incubation area, running the likes of the GEC. Maybe one quick comment there on HBAN. The Halo Business Angel Network is something we got involved in about a decade ago, and it has grown from something embryonic and at this stage has facilitated over 100 million, 110 million of pure private equity from medium to high net worth individuals into startup and scale-up companies. And it's something we've been very proud to be associated with the funding partners, Enterprise Ireland, Intertrade Ireland, and then more recently Invest Northern Ireland.
Very good. And tell me, Michael, what's the big go-forward initiatives for Dublin Business Innovation Centre now?
Indeed, Martin. Obviously, like everybody, you can't stand still, and you all the time have to reinvent and innovate and look to the future. So the strategic projects for us as an organisation currently are two main ones. And one is the bringing to the market with a new seed to Series A venture fund. And I'm delighted to say after quite some time, a couple of years of work and effort, we have launched in October last year the Ireland Smart Tech Fund. It's a 30 million seed to Series A venture fund. Venture capital in Ireland has come on dramatically in the last 10, 20 years, and the level of funding around is multiples quantum of what it was before. However, there all the time remains a gap in the seed area, because seed is difficult to do. Seed is an area we know. We've been involved in venture from way back, long before our time. In 1991, when Dublin BIC was involved in bringing the first seed fund to Ireland, it was a 1 million fund. More recently, we've been involved with the AIB seed fund, where we've invested in 40 companies, and that's now in exit mode. The new fund is quite unique, the Ireland Smart Tech Fund, in that it's underpinned by funding from 15 private individuals. These are entrepreneurs who've built and sold businesses or continue to run these businesses and have made an investment in this new fund. They obviously come from entrepreneurial backgrounds, understand entrepreneurship and see the value of it. And then the fund, of course, is also heavily supported through public funds through Enterprise Ireland. And we seek through this fund really to invest in 25 to 30 of the very best companies we can find in Ireland over the next 4 or 5 years.
And are those companies in particular sectors?
Indeed, yeah. So the particularly strong focus, which is aligned with the area where Ireland has its strengths, are most certainly in software, with a particular bias towards B2B, business-to-business software, which is where, again, Ireland can succeed and has succeeded very well. And we are also investing through the fund in medical device, med tech, but particularly the subset of medical device, where, again, Ireland has a strong track record. And a little bit of that there is this whole thing of interconnecting FDI with Indigenous entrepreneurship. So clearly we have very strong presence in medtech and in software with international companies here. And we have lots of people spinning out of those who are capable of setting up these new businesses.
You mentioned the GEC earlier, which is, of course, the Guinness Enterprise Centre, which is a large incubation centre here in Dublin 8, managed by Dublin BIC. I know there's some big changes happening there. Could you tell us about that?
Yes, Martin. The Guinness Enterprise Centre is around since the late 1990s, and has supported many companies in the interim. But we have been working over the last couple of years to really make a step change to the centre. And currently, as we speak, we have a 10 million expansion project of the Guinness Enterprise Centre to transition it from the success it is into a global entrepreneurial super hub. The idea there is a centre that gives physical expression to government policy at the juncture of indigenous entrepreneurship and FDI. It's nationally, regionally, nationally, and internationally interconnected. The GC itself will support over 1,500 jobs over a 5-year period. As you know very well, it's in the heart of inner city Dublin 8, and it's a really exciting time. We're interconnected in the GEC with business schools and universities from all around the world, and in particular with what's happening now with Ireland becoming the only English-speaking country in Europe. We see opportunities in 2 ways for the Guinness Enterprise Centre. One is supporting indigenous entrepreneurship and exporting globally, but also in seeing Ireland as a soft landing location for companies coming in and wishing to do business in Europe from the Far East and from North America.
Very good. As you know, Michael, in the very early days of the Guinness Enterprise Centre, I had a company there myself. It allowed us to start up with a very low level of capital investment. It allowed us to expand and indeed to contract when we needed to. And there was a huge, there was what seemed like a huge range of supports there at the time with various professional service providers laid on. But of course, it's gone on leaps and bounds from there now. And when I'm talking to startups, I always recommend that they consider being in such an incubator where there are those supports and the great energy that goes with it from other businesses as well. But if I could move on, we've talked about what Dublin BIC does. I'd like to talk about why it does it. Why should we care about entrepreneurship? What's the role of entrepreneurship in society?
Yeah, this is an area, Martin, that I suppose I'm very passionate about myself. I've spent my career working with small to medium-sized companies originally, internationally, and then back into Ireland. And, I look at the world a little bit in the following way. Countries are underpinned business-wise by economics. Economics is the science of supply and demand. The Austrian economist Joseph Schumpeter referred to what he called or kind of term creative destruction. And you have this concept really of economic innovation. So the whole thing here is if we stand still in any economy, then we go stale and we don't create something new. So in order to progress all the time, we need to have creative destruction, and we need to have new opportunities, new businesses created. Entrepreneurship is at the very core of that. The reason it's important to us is entrepreneurship is what creates economic wealth in a society. And economic wealth is important to us because it allows families and family units and their kids to go to school and go to college and get high-end innovative jobs. So it supports itself in a circular fashion. So the role of entrepreneurship, if you look at the large economies around the world, the G7 economies, they are all backboned by major or strong SME sectors. Now, of course, they have large domestic consumer economies. But when you look at a country like Ireland, naturally FDI is going to be important to us. If you're a startup company in Ireland, you need to be born global. You need to think export from day one. But it's my absolute fundamental belief that the role of indigenous entrepreneurship in the long-term success of us as an economy and a society is extremely important. I think we've made fantastic strides in relative terms in recent years, and I think there's a long way further for us to go, and the future is bright in that regard.
So you've touched on FDI there. Foreign direct investment clearly has been a very large part of the economic miracle in Ireland in the lifetime of yourself and myself. And there's huge benefits with that, massive capital investment, really high quality jobs brought to the country, particularly in the digital media and pharmaceutical sectors. We've seen it. A lot of positives from it. There are some negatives or at least risks with it as well. We know that that capital is extremely mobile, and certainly on the global geopolitical front, we see some demands being made for some of that capital to be repatriated back to the US and so on. Are you of a view that now is a time when we should be considering a change in the balance there from FDI to indigenous innovation in the Irish economy?
My view, Martin, is that, as we touched on a little earlier there, we're a small open economy. In that regard, FDI is and will continue to be extremely important to us into the future. Today, there are probably about 250,000 people employed in over 1,200 companies in FDI here. However, I don't see it as mutually exclusive. You know, for example, if I think back, I saw a news item during the week there on the last couple of days, actually, on MasterCard, announcing 1,500 jobs right here at the moment, reaffirming that commitment in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic where we are at the moment. Now, what people mightn't know is that, you know, MasterCard's presence in Ireland started in 2008 when it paid around $100 million for an Irish company, Orbiscom, which was headed up by super entrepreneur Gary Lyons. And, you know, out of that in 2012, MasterCard set up MasterCard Labs on the back of the Orbiscom technology here in Ireland. So what we see today, which is now in a number of years' time, over 2,000 jobs at MasterCard here has come from that. With regard to the, let's say, the symbiosis and maybe at times the to and fro between the two, of course, there's competition a little bit, particularly for talent, and with the large companies here who can pay very highly, that can be a challenge for talent acquisition for younger companies. However, overall, I see the combination of indigenous entrepreneurship and FDI as something working very well. To the core question you were asking, I do think that on one hand, we've made fantastic progress. Entrepreneurship is more respected here than it was before. There are a great range of supports available through Enterprise Ireland. And if you see, you know, startup companies coming in here from around Europe, they comment on that. Notwithstanding that, I do think there's an opportunity for us at a national, at a government, at a political level to have an even stronger focus on the area of indigenous entrepreneurship, so that we can take some more control of our own destiny. So while FDI will remain important, I believe that indigenous entrepreneurship can become more important into the future. And, you know, if you look at companies like Decawave in recent times, headed by Kieran Connell and Michael McLaughlin, you know, acquired earlier this year for $400 million, you know, leaders in global wireless technology, or companies like Binatel, who are operating out of the Guinness Enterprise Centre, another leader in wireless technology, or the likes of Ken Cahill with Silver Cloud Health. Ken moved to the States to lead his company, a health tech platform. You know, there is some fantastic entrepreneurship underway here, and we need to celebrate entrepreneurship and to support those risk takers that fund that. So lots done, and opportunity to do more to raise the bar on indigenous entrepreneurship.
It's a great point you make that it isn't an either or. There's a symbiosis there between FDI and indigenous innovation, and that there's one feeding the other in both directions. So it's a great point. You mentioned the pandemic there. We are in the pandemic. And that's had a huge economic impact already. Previous recessions have had an effect in regard to entrepreneurship. It has provided, on occasion, waves of what's sometimes called forced entrepreneurs. But what do you see as the near-term future for entrepreneurship? Is there going to be some changes?
In the very, very short term, as we sit here today, obviously we're in an incredibly difficult situation. But I think maybe taking the slightly longer term view, nobody's absolutely certain how quick the recovery will come. Clearly, we're headed right into a major recession. The hope and expectation is, notwithstanding the severity of and suddenness of the impact here, that we can get back out quicker on the other side. Previous recessions, as you say, have resulted in forced entrepreneurship. I guess and I certainly expect some of that this time. The question, I think, a little bit will be whether it'll be to the same level as before or not. And why do I say that? Well, the current recession certainly is going to impact hugely on the areas of tourism and retail and such like. But time is yet to tell what level it will impact on maybe in or not entrepreneurship policies, what level it will impact on professional services and such high-end jobs. Whereas the last time around, there was huge impact there, which brought many entrepreneurs from those areas. Notwithstanding, the outcome overall here will be, wages will be more moderate, unemployment will be up for a period of time. That in itself will bring talent available, and talent is something extremely important. All successful businesses are, built on really, really good people. So I've no doubt whatsoever we will see some forced entrepreneurship, and entrepreneurs are incredibly resilient. They're incredibly creative. And although we have major tsunami and major turmoil right now, I fully expect when we look back, as we do today, at companies that grew up at the last recession, when we look back in the future, there will be companies in this 12-month period that are created will go on to be huge successes.
Michael, you've been working in the enterprise support space for nearly 2 decades. Mm-hmm. You've seen it all, the hockey stick sales forecasts, mm-hmm. the mad scientists, mm-hmm. the crazy geniuses, the irrational exuberance of the entrepreneur. What's your top tips for those would-be entrepreneurs who are considering making that leap now?
Yeah, thanks, Martin. Tempus fugit, or time flies, as they say. The first thing, and probably one of the most important things, I think, is to be passionate and genuinely interested in what it is you're going to go about. You yourself, have been on that entrepreneurial journey successfully and exited, etc. And there are very few entrepreneurs I know who have not had some time, really tough times. So when you're going to be in those tough times, you better be doing something that you're interested in and passionate about, and that will help see you through. Another point related to that, I think, is to surround yourself with really, really good people. And that's both in the business, but also outside the business, be it at a board level or advisor level, etc. People are prepared very much, is my experience, to help here if you reach out and ask. And obviously you do so in an appropriate manner. Back to the business itself as an entrepreneur, ultimately, it's all about your value proposition and really thoroughly, truly, deeply trying to understand the customer need. We spoke earlier about entrepreneurship in economics and supply and demand. Well, ultimately, entrepreneurship is about providing a solution to some problem and doing so in an economic manner that you can extract return from the marketplace, so that there's win-win for everybody. So I would particularly encourage people to work extremely hard at trying to ensure that they have a product market fit. And the way to do that is get to the market, sooner rather than later. An awful lot of business is applied common sense. And I suppose the core trait, Martin, that we would look for in successful entrepreneurs would be resilience. It's a long journey, and you need that incredible resilience. And if you're doing something you're passionate about and you're surrounding yourself with good people, I think you've got a great chance, and it's a wonderful time to do so.
There's a number of great points there, Michael. I'll just draw out on 2 of them. Your point about getting to market early. I know that Enterprise Ireland, from all of their experience and research in this area, the businesses that are eventually successful are those ones who do get out to the market early, acquire customers at the earliest possible opportunity, generate revenues at the earliest possible opportunity. And that can vary depending on the type of business you're in, but in general terms, that is true.
Very much, Martin. And maybe if I'm just to maybe add, when you mentioned Enterprise Ireland there, one of the initiatives they have underway in the last couple of years that we've been directly involved with has been the Innovate program for female entrepreneurship, where you yourself, of course, directly involved. And it's just fantastic to see programs like that. In terms of entrepreneurship in Ireland, and the conversation we've just had there are some fantastic exemplars or leaders now in female entrepreneurship. The likes of Avril Copeland at Ticker Fitter, Inner Strength, Patricia Scanlon over at Soapbox Labs, Leonora O'Brien at PharmaPod, and Nora Caldy at Neuritas, and people like this. And one of the things we've seen with that Innovate program is those new entrepreneurs getting out, going to the market early, and just getting feedback, because the market obviously is the ultimate arbitrator and will provide all the guidance in the world.
Very good. Michael, my last question to you. What motivates you and keeps you going, and how do you achieve the resilience you have in the work you do?
It's probably, thanks Martin, it's probably linked a little bit to that last point that I was talking about there, is doing something you're passionate about. Now, I don't think any of us, or very few of us have enough foresight to know exactly what that is. But I suppose if you come across it, you're lucky enough to recognize it. My own background is technology, engineering background, and worked out of Ireland at a previous recession in Saudi Arabia, and then back into London, and then came back to Ireland and worked with a really innovative technology company, and went off around the world again, selling embedded software on silicon chips. And I could see Ireland was doing really, really well with young startups, but maybe not quite getting there with scaling them. And I come back to Smurfit School to do an MBA, and came across Dublin BIC, which I didn't really know about at the time. And obviously many years later, I've ended up now having started doing a little bit of work with them as the CEO. So what motivates me and gives me a kick really is if I see likes of Conor O'Loughlin from Glowfox, who came into us many years ago, with a couple of people, or the likes, as I mentioned earlier, Decawave, which, Kieran Collin and Michael McLaughlin, the founders there. And you see people like this who start off on 1 or 2 people, and then a number of years later employing 50 or 100 people in highly innovative jobs with huge economic impact, and succeeding at a global level. That is something incredibly rewarding. And my sort of take is, if I'm lucky enough to be involved and through a bit of experience can try and contribute in a small way to assisting some of these companies, then I feel good about that. I guess I've got some sort of a gene where I get a kick out of assisting others, and it doesn't do any harm in a world like this.
Very good. If you enjoy what you do, you never have to work a day in your life.
Indeed.
Very good. Michael Culligan, Chief Executive of Dublin BIC, thank you for joining me on the panel at Dublin BIC.
Thank you, Martin.